I'm Lucas Bennett, and in many ways, an average 33-year-old guy, one of 4 partners in a successful plumbing business. When this story begins, I'm married to Elena, 32, almost regarded as a trophy wife and working as a secretary for the owner of the local BMW dealership. Our daughter Maria is 8 years old. We own a house in a nice area of our town and a summer house on a popular island in the Baltic Sea. Elena and I met for the first time when I was installing the town's new central heating system at her parents' house. She was still living at home and was in a very bad mood because she had recently broken her engagement with a brat by the nickname Bum Blasted. This was due to the simple reason that an angry husband had shot him with a salt load from a shotgun at his bare bottom while Bum Blasted was having sex with the shooter's wife. This Bum Blasted was a funny guy. His mother had been an au pair girl in California and was 4 months pregnant when she came back. She gave him the name Ryan because she thought her handsome lover had called himself that, probably as his first name. Bum Blasted's mom somehow met Elias Grant, her old classmate, a poor, shy guy in school whom she never cared about. But now, when she needed a father for her Bum Blasted, she married him after living together for a short time. Elias didn't care about her bringing Bum Blasted with her because he regarded it as a cheap price for marrying a pretty girl that he otherwise could only dream about. Elias adopted her baby, and to everybody's surprise, they got along well together, had 2 daughters, and built up Elias' small computer shop into a chain of 12 big stores, which they sold to a huge multinational company for a fair price. They bought a big mansion in the countryside where Elias, his wife, and daughters began raising horses. Elias spoiled his stepson into becoming a real brat who got everything Elias had never been able to have in his own younger days. As Bum Blasted was a handsome, rich guy, he became very successful with girls, at least until he met Elena and fell in real love with her. But to his disappointment, she had no intentions of having sex before her wedding night. Of course, that was a slight problem for Bum Blasted, but he had simple solutions for such matters. Elena was really in a very sad mood after Bum Blasted cheated. I wanted to cheer her up and asked her for a date, which she accepted. We had a wonderful evening, which ended at my apartment, where she told me that she had decided to change her lifestyle and, from now on, do everything as her friends did. To my great surprise and joy, after some intense, tender necking, she allowed me to have sex with her, probably as revenge for Bum Blasted's cheating. However, despite several serious attempts, I didn't get any further dates with her. Instead, rumors began to spread about Elena being a rather wild party girl with many short relationships, even with some of Bum Blasted's friends. Bum Blasted had no interest in living a quiet country life at his parents' mansion, so he left town to study at a university, where he continued to build his reputation as a very successful womanizer. Despite his many successful seductions, he could never accept or forget that Elena, during her wild days, had slept with several of his friends, but had denied him while they were engaged and planning their future. About a year after my first successful date with Elena, I met her at a party, and we began dating again. She promised me that her wild life was history. Since we had good times together, we were soon regarded as a couple and married 3 years later, when she became pregnant with Maria. A few months after the wedding, I did some plumbing work for one of Bum Blasted's old friends, who teased me by saying that Bum Blasted had sworn to seduce Elena and show evidence of it to the whole town. The friend said that, as far as he knew, Bum Blasted had never failed in his attempts to seduce a married woman when he really wanted her. This was not very happy news for a newlywed like me, so I told Elena. She promised never to give him a chance to be alone with her or carry out his nasty intentions. Of course, I was extra cautious for a while, but as expected, nothing happened. After some years, I heard that Bum Blasted had married a wealthy English girl and was living in England. Elena and I had a rather average marriage, with its ups and downs. Therefore, Bum Blasted's threats were forgotten for many years, until they resurfaced like a bolt from the blue. I can still remember that awful Wednesday evening as if it were yesterday. Elena and I were sitting in our living room, watching The Weather Girl on TV. She was giving good news about the coming weekend when Elena suddenly got a serious look on her face and said, "My dear Lucas, please listen to me. I have something very important to tell you." "Yes, go on. Did something happen to you today?" "No, not at all. In fact, it's an old story that began before you and I met." Do you remember that I was engaged to a handsome guy named Ryan Grant? Oh yes, I remember that creepy bum blasted because he was shot in the butt with a salt load from a shotgun while he was screwing someone's wife. There are still rumors about this guy. He's said to still be a real **** hole. Indeed. What about him? Is he shot again? Elena had turned pale for some reason when she replied, "No, of course not. He's living in England but was here for an old friend's wedding, where Gabri Maria Eriksson, you know her, met him. They got acquainted, and when he found out she knew me, he became very curious and asked a lot about me. She gave him my cell phone number. I could still remember what Ryan Grant, better known by his nickname Bum Blasted, had promised to do with Elena. I understood that trouble was coming. The warning bells rang in my ears as I asked, "Did he call you?" "Yes, he did. We've talked a few times about the good old days." Good old days? It's almost 10 years ago. You two were together for a few months. He cheated, and you dumped him. Not much for any good old days. You don't understand. We had so many dreams about the future that we want to talk about. Isn't that future with Bum Blasted behind you? Or what's the problem? He would like to see me. Of course he wants to see you. You know very well that he promised to seduce you and show evidence to his friends. It would be a bit difficult to do that by phone. Elena was ashen gray when she replied, "Don't see ghosts in daylight when I'm trying to have a serious talk with you. He wants to see me as a friend and nothing else." Now I was sure trouble was coming. I said, "See you as a friend? No problem. You can invite him and his family to come and see us for a weekend. Okay for me, as long as his English wife is with him." "No, he's not coming here because he won a bonus week at a 5-star hotel in Ischia and invited me to go with him. His wife doesn't have time to go and doesn't dare to fly. She trusts him and doesn't object if he wants to see and talk about old times with an old friend." I shouted, "But I have objections, very serious objections indeed. Have you lost your common sense and gone insane? You ought to see a therapist as soon as possible, that's for sure. Please calm down and listen to me. I have already accepted to go, and I intend to go because it is a once-in-a-lifetime offer. You and I can never afford to spend a week at such a hotel in Ischia, at least not for the time being, when we have so many expenses at the summer house." She was right about that because the romantic island of Ischia is the most expensive of all Italian holiday resorts and therefore popular among rich and famous people. I continued shouting, "Do you still love that damn creep?" Elena had turned pale when she replied, "No, of course not. I love you, and you ought to know that you are my only love. Isn't it a strange way to show your so-called love for me by going to Ischia for having sex orgies with that damn horny, bum-blasted creep?" I retorted, "No, no, no, of course not. Have I said a word about sex with him? He has not demanded anything from me, and I have not promised him anything. The truth is that I have no intentions of cheating on you." I couldn't take much more of her nonsense and yelled, "No sex and not cheating on me? Why in the hell do you think he will take the expenses and bring a 304 with him to that expensive, exotic place? Doesn't matter if he has conned some sucker to pay the bill. If you don't think that he is going to screw you hard, screw you often, just like he bragged to do, you must be incredibly naive. That's the simple and disgusting truth, and I can bet a lot that his evidence will be visible on the web." She was obviously surprised by my objections and sobbed, "Do you really regard me as a 304 because Ryan has earned a bonus week at Ischia and offered me to go with him because his wife can't? I'd have been crazy if I hadn't accepted Ryan's kind offer for having such a great holiday for free. Did his wife say that to you? Looks like she did not. So yes, I regard you as a 304. No doubt about that. And please remember, once a 304, always a 304 in people's opinion. You can never wash away that reputation when you're back home, obviously." She hadn't expected such comments because she continued sobbing and said, "You'll see that everything will be fine when I'm back because nothing nasty will happen there at Ischia, and nobody but you will know I'm going there with Ryan." I know, and I don't see any reason to keep your madness a secret, especially not when the whole town will soon be able to see your orgies and my terrible humiliation on the web. Now she began to fear that the price for her free trip would be much higher than expected and told me, "Please don't do that to me and to us. I promise to keep you well rewarded when coming back home." There's only one thing you can do if you want matters to remain fine between you and me. Take your phone, call the damn bum-blasted creep, and cancel the trip. Do it now. I'm sorry, but I can't do that. Those words from Elena were the last straw on my back that broke my marriage. Why any further arguing for saving it felt meaningless. In that case, I can only say, have a nice trip, though I hate what you are doing. To my great surprise, I could feel some kind of relief when I went to the living room and poured a large glass of my best single malt whiskey. Neither Elena nor I had any further comments about her trip. If our problems had been limited to her trip, I'm sure there would have been ways to get her to cancel it. But the main reason for my relief was that now I would get rid of our expensive summer house, which had been a real pain in my ass. Several of Elena's friends had summer houses on a popular island in the Baltic Sea. She had forced me to buy a house there for a sky-high price. I had refused as much as I could but gave in when Elena began talking about separation. She didn't understand that some of her friends had inherited their houses. Others shared houses with their parents or had bought them a long time ago at quite a different price level. We got ours at the top of the boom, which almost ruined us. Though we had sold most of our shares, we had even taken a big loan with huge interest payments. The house itself wasn't enough for her. She even demanded that I work on the maintenance every summer weekend and during my entire summer holidays, which created serious quarrels and made me feel like a slave. In most cases, the maintenance was completely unnecessary. Of course, Elena had promised to assist me, but she never did because her friends and she always had something going on. Hiring people to do all the jobs was out of the question for economic reasons. I saw no end to Elena's demands and suggestions for maintenance. Elena always found new ideas in her magazines, and I had seriously begun to regret that I didn't choose separation. Elena's latest craziness was planning and demanding that I make a Japanese garden on a nice lawn during the next summer. I suspected that nowadays she regarded me as a chicken after her victory in our first summer house quarrel and thought that, once a chicken, always a chicken, would mean I would even accept her Ischia trip after some nagging. But the last straw on the poor camel's back was one straw too much. Not much was said during the evening, and the next morning, she was in a good mood again. She gave me a bright smile and jokingly asked, "Do you still think you are married to a 304? Have you canceled your trip?" "No, and I can't do that because I don't have any intentions of going on such a trip. You asked about my opinion, and it still remains as yes, I'm married to a 304. Her bright smile faded away when she shouted, "Who cares about your opinion?" Nothing further was said during breakfast. My first thing at the job was to call Clara Smith at her work. She sounded surprised, but accepted my invitation for lunch. Clara is a lovely woman living 4 houses from us, and she is the mother of my daughter's best friend, Wilma. Clara dumped her cheating creep of a husband about 5 months ago. She is quite different from Elena, and I must confess that I've admired her very much for a long time. Though she is not as much of a trophy wife as Elena, Clara must be regarded as rather handsome. After some small talk at our lunch, I told Clara that I would tell her a secret if she promised to keep it and even offered her a fair gift. Clara was surprised but promised to keep my secret. I told her that Elena would be going to Ischia with her old boyfriend, Bum Blasted, and I would file for divorce. The gift was that I offered Clara and her daughter to come with my daughter, Maria, and me to Euro Disney in Paris, with all their expenses paid. She suspected some hidden catch and asked, "What are the conditions for that trip?" "There are no conditions, not before the trip, not during the trip, and not after the trip. The only matter is that it would be easier for me and more fun for Maria to be there with a friend. Can you tell me a few more details about your plans for that trip? Please remember that I neither can nor want to replace Elena in any way. No need for that. I don't have any plan because, if you say yes, we'll plan everything together. Think about it and give me a call when you can say yes or no." Thereafter, Clara asked me several questions about my divorce, and I told her the truth about Elena's trip to Ischia with her ex-boyfriend. Only 1 hour after lunch, she called me. After a few questions, she said yes. Already that same evening, Clara had fixed a babysitter for her daughter, and we met at my job to talk about our trip. We had no problems agreeing on all the details. I had expected her to want 2 separate rooms in Paris, but she suggested that a family room would be more fun for our daughters. I had no objections. Thereafter, Clara and I had almost daily phone calls at work, and everything went fine for our trip. We booked flights to Paris, rented a car, and booked a room at a hotel near Euro Disney. Elena and I didn't have any further quarrels about her trip. The only difference was that I had lost my interest in sex with her, but obviously, she didn't care much about that, at least not during the first week after our quarrel. I used the time to take small steps toward my divorce, but had to be very careful to keep Elena out of my plans. One day, when I was away at a gas station washing her car, I found that she had forgotten some papers in the glove compartment, obviously printed out from a computer at her job. They were color prints from the Ischia Hotel's homepage and an email from Bum blasted about their flight time and the boat to Ischia. It was indeed a great gift for me, almost as if she were teasing me on purpose. Elena would probably have canceled her trip if I had given her the ultimatum: stay at home or divorce. But I didn't see any reason to give her that last chance to save our marriage and the damn summer house, because, in my opinion, she had already cheated on me when she said yes to Bum Blasted's invitation to her screwing Ischia trip. She must have understood that an infamous womanizer like Bum Blasted didn't invite her on an expensive holiday just to talk about old times. Of course, I was in an almost similar situation because of my trip with Clara and the promise to her that there would be no conditions for our trip. But our trip was a different matter because Clara was single, and I had signed my divorce papers when we left. What could happen between Clara and me after the trip would be a different question. Elena had no objections when I told her that Maria and I would go to Euro Disney in Paris while she was in Ischia and didn't question any details. Both Elena and I, probably for different reasons, had lost interest in sex until the last evening before her departure. She had some packing to do, so I went to bed before her. She tried to come near me, but I pushed her away. "Never come near me." I screamed at her. "Oh my God, please talk to me." "Yes, we'll talk when we are back from our trips." She left early in the morning for the airport. When I knew they were on the boat to Ischia, I rang Bum Blasted's wife and had a serious talk with her. She got angry as a bee and told me that her dear husband had gone far too far this time. It had been a rather easy game to find her. A phone call to Elena's friend Nancy had told me where in England Bum Blasted was living with his family. People with unusual names are usually easy to find, which is why there hadn't been any problem finding the phone number to the Grant family's home phone. Then I wrote a letter to Elena. "Dear Elena, your old and new boyfriend, Bum Blasted, seems to be a bad liar because his wife told me that she was working as an air hostess when meeting her husband, and it had been a great pleasure for her having a week vacation in Ischia. You ought to have talked with her instead of believing everything that the horny Bum Blasted told you. However, she promised to come to Ischia as soon as possible for a serious talk with your lover and you. Please find copies of the divorce papers the court received today. From now on, you can feel free to do whatever you want without caring a bit about me. Of course, you didn't care much about me earlier either. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in Ischia reading this letter. Lucas, your soon-to-be ex-husband." I called their hotel reception, where they promised to give my fax to Elena when Bum Blasted, and she checked into the hotel. Then I faxed the letter and the divorce papers to the hotel. Both the home phone and my cell phone began to ring several times. As soon as Elena was expected to have checked into the hotel, I didn't take any voice calls but read her text messages. 1 hour after the first, she sent me this: "I'm coming back home tomorrow so we can clear up this misunderstanding." I replied, "You are not sharing a hotel room with the damn Bum Blasted by any misunderstanding. You went there on purpose, and now you have to pay the consequences. No reason to complain. Maria and I will be abroad for a few days. I don't care a bit about where you are." Later that evening, I even got a call from Abby Grant, who told me that she was already in Napoli and had demanded Ryan to immediately throw Elena out of their hotel room. Ryan had called her back 15 minutes later and promised that Elena had now left the hotel, which meant her leaving less than an hour after arriving. Abby doubted that Elena and Ryan had been in the mood for any love after her phone calls. Meanwhile, Elena tried to call me after receiving her divorce papers. Abby said she would take a jet boat to Ischia after breakfast. Clara, the girls, and I left for our trip the next morning. We flew with Air France to Orly, where we picked up the Renault Megane we had booked to rent. Most GPS units sold here have maps for the whole of Western Europe, and as mine was rather newly updated, It was almost a piece of cake to find our hotel. The girls were happy about having each other on the trip, and Clara and I got along very well, which meant there weren't any problems in our family room, except that the two double beds were what the French call grand lit, meaning slightly wider single beds. Clara and I looked at each other, burst out laughing, and solved that problem easily. I didn't care much about Elena, though she was back home already the next day after she had left. I didn't take any of her phone calls. She sent me a lot of text messages, trying to explain that she had not cheated on me and had spent her only night at Ischia alone in another hotel. I replied that she cheated on me the moment she said yes to the bum's invitation to spend a week with him. She had left him only because he threw her out of their hotel room after getting cold feet following a conversation with his wife. Of course, I didn't know for sure, but it was probably a very good guess. Clara didn't take any part in those text messages between Elena and me. We spent 2 intense and pleasant days at Euro Disney, and all 4 of us had a great time. On our 3rd day in France, we went to Paris for shopping, visiting the Eiffel Tower and Versailles, and taking a boat trip on the Seine. When our girls had fallen asleep during our last night at the hotel, Clara said she wanted to give me a gift and told me to remain silent. She whispered in my ear, "Lucas, I love you." I replied, "I love you, Clara." Though our intimacy was both slow and quiet, so as not to wake the sleeping girls, it was very good and memorable for both of us because we knew it was the beginning of a new chapter in our lives. Afterward, as we lay close together, Clara asked if I would still love her back home. I promised her, real love isn't dependent on where we are. She replied with passionate kisses, though we didn't have any more intimacy that night. Clara wanted to know my plans for the future. I told her that, for several reasons, it was out of the question for me to cancel my divorce. The first thing I needed to do was find somewhere to live. She immediately replied, "You can be my lodger and get a loving hostess." What could I say? I asked, "Are you serious?" "Yes, I am," she said. "If you told me the truth about your love for me, Maria and you are welcome to live with Wilma and me." "I love you and accept your kind offer," I replied. We both understood that it was a very fast decision to move into her house after only 4 days together when we had likely only shown our best sides. But before we fell asleep, we agreed that sometimes one must dare to win.